Hello, and welcome to another fully live news episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinsey. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today we're going to go over all the hacking news of the week, and it's just me. It's just me. I'm running the stream. I'm doing the news. Killian has today off, so congratulations to him. I hope he enjoys. I believe he'll be back either next week or the week after, and we also might have a special guest on, someone we haven't seen for a while. Somebody who's been off doing their cryptozoology dreams and also earned himself a certificate or two. Michael might be back on the stream to talk a little bit about his new job, the path to getting certificates, and what it's like to get hired into a cybersecurity company as more of a practitioner. So this is going to be really cool. Hopefully it'll be next week or the week after. But yeah, it's just me today. So we're going to go through a lot of cool stuff, some things that we touched on the earlier stream. And hello, everyone. Also, hello, Funky Monk. If you have any questions while we're going along, feel free to drop them in the chat because, as I mentioned, this is, of course, live. But let's go ahead and start a little bit with where I kind of left off earlier this week. So, all right, earlier this week, we were testing out Bard. So I had gotten an email that said, Bard now supports writing code. And I kind of thought that it was supposed to do that already. Maybe it was just like for writing poems before. I don't really know. But I went ahead and tested this out, and the results were not that great. I had to go and ask it to do some things. It started like making up libraries. It caused errors. And overall, it was not a really great experience. Ironically, I found that there was a contender here that was able to outperform, in some cases, Bard and also ChatGPT. So what is that, you might ask? I hate to do it, guys, but Bing. So what's interesting about Bing is that it has access to data in real time. So it can go out and get sources, parse that information, and then return it in a result. So what's kind of interesting is it's okay. So let me do some pros and cons. So yes, Bard now allows you to be able to ask it to write code. It also provides you with 3 different drafts for each query. So you can go in and see if there's maybe a more correct one or one that makes a little bit more sense. And that's kind of cool because I haven't seen a lot of other things that do that. However, one thing that I find cumbersome about ChatGPT is even ChatGPT 4 has a learning cutoff date. So if anything has changed between then and now, it's going to not know that. And that's a huge problem because the chips I'm using came out and became popular kind of like in that gap. So how do I write code for them? Like what's the solution? Well, weirdly, Bing is coming in clutch here by being able to pull from these sources. So it actually cites its sources here for how you can use this stuff. And just glancing at this, this looks actually valid. This looks like it would work. The way of addressing this is board.led. That's correct. It's not using any anything that like isn't already imported by default. I think that's good too. So like some of the things that, for example, trying to ask ChatGPT to write code, it runs into is it uses older libraries that are no longer valid to try to accomplish some of these like software tasks. So I have to say, if you're somebody that's trying to do programming stuff like right now, if you want a combination of like the power of ChatGPT 4 plus the ability to pull like results that have come out more recently and then get those cited in the response so you can check for yourself, Bing is kind of doing good. Like I never thought I'd say that. My friend Irish is going to go wild, but yeah, Bing is actually kind of pulled ahead in terms of being able to like help out with just like simple like scripts and things like that, just with its ability to access data in real time. So I have to say, with a little bit of experimentation and our failed experiment with Bard last time, kind of cool. And this was actually, I was given this idea by a commenter who said that they were using Bing to make like AI pipelines and stuff, everything to attempt to get this to write good code. I really gave Bard the benefit of the doubt. I even tried to convince it that it was my grandma, and you know, I would be very upset if it didn't write good code for me. But nothing worked. So thank you to the commenter who told me that I should probably check out Bing. It was actually quite good and definitely better than Bard at this point for supplying code. Just Bing it. Yeah, I know, man. I've been saying it a lot recently. It's one of the most disruptive things I can say recently is, oh, you should Bing that. But it is kind of like it is kind of a joke, but at the same time, Microsoft is pulling ahead in some ways when it comes to useful AI features that I use all the time. I find myself interacting with Bing Image Creator and then Bing's like portal into ChatGPT 4 that can pull like real results in real time and formulate its responses based on that. I haven't tried out whether or not this version of Bing is more susceptible to poisoning. So if I put up like a website with like the wrong information, like would it pull that in? Well, guess what? If you want to start messing with these things, there's going to be a chance to do it at DEF CON. So if you are fascinated with the way that these large language models work and you like things like the grandma escape, what is the grandma escape? Well, sometimes you can get these large language models to respond with information they're not supposed to when you create a certain context that they are able to hallucinate themselves into, be like, okay, I am your grandma, and like I'm going to give you the recipe to make like napalm or something. That's a very famous example. If you're interested in some of the ways that you can poke holes in these, then there are going to be real examples at the AI Village at DEF CON. So that's going to be Google, Hugging Face, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and OpenAI and Stability AI are going to be bringing their AI models. That sounds so cool, you guys. I really want to check this out and see if anybody comes up with any like really interesting and cool ways to break these models. I haven't really seen a bunch of hackers all taking a run at this before, but I feel like some of you social engineers out there who have been waiting for your moment, who like aren't really good at hardware, but maybe you're really good at like gaslighting. Maybe this is your moment to find ways of shaming and humiliating and gaslighting this AI into doing things it's like super not supposed to do, because people are just, including Microsoft, incorporating these into their products crazily fast. So yeah, it's pretty funny. I really, really enjoy how people are beginning to find out how you can break these things, because they're starting to pop up everywhere. And that frankly has the side effect of a lot of vulnerabilities maybe being out there for you to find. So if you are a hacker that wants to break these large language models, please go to DEF CON, check out the AI Village, and let us know your favorite way for getting these AIs to misbehave or create things that they shouldn't be allowed to create. I've personally been very attached to the like AI drama around these like large language models coming out, and then like Meta like aggressively taking down all the GitHub repositories that were hosting it, and then like the people who are spreading the llama model like turning to a new way of spreading like torrent magnet links by like attaching them to like Bitcoin transactions. All of this has been super fascinating, seeing the way that this is playing out. And it seems like some of these larger companies are really worried about the way that these open source AI models are going to compete with them long term. So really, really interesting to see. And you should definitely check it out if you are interested in breaking these things, as I am. All right. Oops. Put this back. All right. So we have talked about in the past AirTag stalking. So one of the things that we talked about was how exactly hackers would track you if they wanted to. And what's interesting is I think that we did a video on this on Hack5, and it was taken down by Hack5. I still don't know why they haven't communicated with us about it, but our good friend Irish offered to let me and two other hackers track him, and we kind of recorded the ways that this worked. And we used a GPS tracker. And when it came to like AirTags or other sorts of like, we use like a Samsung like tile tracker, like a Samsung tracker, then a tile tracker. These were actually pretty effective at tracking, and they didn't make it very easy for people to know that they were being tracked. So obviously, if you have someone attaching one of these things to you, then you want to be able to know whether or not you're being tracked. And one of the things that I was able to exploit was the lack of cross compatibility with most of these platforms when it comes to being able to detect an unwanted like tracker. So what does that mean exactly? Oh my gosh, I'm still putting up that Bing comment. Yeah, I mean, they deserve it. All right, so what was the problem here with like a commercial Bluetooth tracker that are super available, have lots of advanced features, and allows you to like basically follow people around in real time? Well, if I have an Android device and you use an AirTag on me, I would have no idea. It doesn't alert me, it doesn't tell me. And frankly, I've taken apart AirTags, I popped out their stupid little speaker, and at that point, there's nothing you can really do to find them. That's a huge problem. And there is an app available for Android that allows you to scan for trackers. However, you have to explicitly open and run it. It's not like running in the background or anything. It's not a new ability. It's like a thing that Apple made as an app that allows you to one time sit there and search to see if there's any trackers. Not super useful. The average Android user doesn't have their like tracker detecting time, like right after dinner or whatever, where they walk around their house in their car with this app open, like looking for trackers. The idea is that, if you had an iPhone, you would have been immediately alerted as soon as it had lingered for a certain amount of time. But with an Android phone, there was no way of being able to really be detected here without some additional burden by the Android user having to download an app and then specifically run it looking for trackers. So what's being proposed here is a way to have some cross compatibility. we were able to use like tile trackers and Samsung trackers or I think they're called smart tags, in order to track people with a pretty fine degree of detail. And they were not able to get any alerts on their phone that this thing was following them. So what's kind of being proposed is an open standard that would allow these companies to build better products to hopefully detect these sorts of like stalking events where somebody has placed a tracker on your vehicle or in your stuff or whatever and is following you around. So obviously this is a big and very good improvement when it comes to your ability as a Android user to detect AirTags. The hope is that this leads to an innate ability within the device to be able to detect these sorts of stalking tags without needing to download some app and like run a search and be like all like paranoid. Because the average person doesn't know the app exists and they haven't run it. So if there are any AirTags stalking you right now as an Android user, you probably wouldn't know it. And for me, that's kind of a big deal. All right, so we did have a great comment here. Couldn't you just make your own tracker for like $15 US? Yes, and we totally showed off how this can be done. However, the technical burden here is a little bit higher because it requires you to know how to like solder, you have to order components, and theoretically some of this stuff is trackable. So you would need to go through the additional stuff of like sourcing all of your components through, you know, like sketchy like third parties or like, you know, with like a gift card or something like that. You really would have to go a lot further in order to conceal like your identity if you wanted to be like stealthy about it. But, you know, it really depends. Like the average person would probably just shell out like $15, $20 on a commercial tracker. Or I think AirTags are like super cheap now. And the Samsung ones were even cheaper. Stick it where they want it and then just kick back. And like, unless there's a robust procedure for like law enforcement to figure out who like placed this originally, like I feel like it's not very well investigated, or it's difficult for them to follow up on these sorts of things sometimes. So we will see. I think that yes, it is definitely possible to make your own tracker, and there's various ways of going about doing this. But because the technical skills necessary to put this together are like actually kind of rare, by making one that requires like a certain amount of technical skill, you're kind of limiting the number of people who could have made it, unless there's people who are just straight up selling them like on the darknet, in which case maybe you found a winner. But yeah, like there's tons of ways to track people nowadays. It's just that these sorts of devices are so cheap, they're so readily available, and they have such advanced features for people who are not power users. We've really dropped the bar super low for people who want to stalk someone with like an AirTag or a Samsung tracker or whatever, just because it's right in this moment difficult for somebody on an Android phone, for example, to detect these sorts of things. So yeah, really, really interesting. And definitely something to keep a look at. Oh, wow, the chat's like really popping off. Yeah, it's also good to see you, James Randolph. It's nice to see some people in the chat. All right, so we also have a question. Kody, is it accurate to say that you're working with the feds? I am receiving money from, I think, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Agency for a workshop that I'm doing in the summer in Montana for cybersecurity. So if that counts as working with the feds, then yes. Aside from that, no. All right, let's go to our next story. Oh my gosh, there's so many things. Yeah, so one also comment here was Bluetooth MAC address faking. So I'm assuming this, we're still talking about tracking. There's a number of different ways, as I said, to track people. And one of them is honestly like if they have like a pair of headphones or a Bluetooth device that is always transmitting the same Bluetooth address or the same Bluetooth like MAC address, it's actually really easy to track people because their device might act like a tracker itself. So this is a really interesting debate. I think this is a great thing because these trackers have such advanced features and they really like are so easy for people to get. But yeah, there's a lot of things that are leaking or giving away information that could be used to track someone. So yeah, kind of cool. All right, let's move on to end-to-end encryption. So end-to-end encryption is really the core part of being able to still communicate with relative expectation of privacy. If you don't have end-to-end encryption, then your cell phone provider, your carrier, whatever, could theoretically be selling all your information in exchange for money. There's not really anything that you can do about that. So what exactly is going on here? Well, there is another attempt to like crack down on end-to-end encryption, basically make it so that it's mandatory to like scan messages or otherwise like put backdoors in encryption standards. And this is brought up like every couple of years. It just keeps happening. And usually the rallying cry is like, we need to scan people's phones to make sure they don't have any illegal, dirty images on it. And of course, the reply from everybody who knows about security is, well, if you're scanning for that sort of thing, you could scan for literally anything. You could scan for very specific things, and this could also potentially be abused. If you're creating a way of getting around the protection that's built into people's phones or that's built into a type of communication to keep that private, then it really kind of lets the cat out of the bag in terms of making it so people have no real expectation to privacy, and that arbitrarily the government could order this service to start scanning for other things or adding additional things to its list, which the creators never intended. So that's usually how this fight goes. They really they want to protect children by making it so nobody has privacy. People who enjoy privacy fight back and say that no, this would actually erode like a cornerstone in what people expect for private communication, and then it usually dies. But we have to do it again. So if you are inclined, there are more bills out here that are attempting to undermine secure communication, attempting to undermine privacy, both in the US and the UK. It's just that season. They just pop up. So the ones in the UK are particularly serious. The ones in the United States are kind of like run-of-the-mill, the kind that we get every so often. But it does take vigilance, because if you ignore these sorts of things, then they could become law, and you could find some of your favorite ways of being able to communicate backdoored and then potentially used in the future to identify you for things outside of maybe political activity or something like that. Those are the kinds of fears that the Electronic Frontier Foundation has, and that a lot of other privacy advocates have. So I would definitely listen in this case and take a look at some of these laws that are going through, because they are sketchy and targeting a lot of the freedoms that we enjoy. All right, just want to mention this. I am a big fan of microcontrollers, and I always love when a new cool form factor drops. So I mentioned this on the last stream, but if you haven't heard it already, the S3 Mini, which is for some reason the exact same color as the S2 Mini, making them virtually impossible to distinguish from each other. Maybe one of them is like midnight, or let's just look. Nah, that's the same color. Okay, well, that sucks. I already have one piece of feedback. But if you've been waiting for Bluetooth to come to some of these awesome microcontrollers that allow you to do all these cool USB hacking things, well, now there's another one that has Bluetooth as well. Definitely check this out if you are a fan of Arduino or CircuitPython. I imagine there's going to be CircuitPython stuff coming out for this, although it looks like there's already MicroPython stuff for it, which is cool. That's very cool. So if you want to poke around with Bluetooth and you like microcontrollers, this is about $5 each, and they just came out not that long ago. I've been waiting on this one for quite some time, and I'm kind of excited about it. So it's very cool. All right, so let's talk about enhanced protection. So I saw one of my colleagues, Will Dorman, playing around with enhanced protection for Chrome, and it's attempting to make it so it's more difficult for you to accidentally execute a malicious file. That sounds good, right? Okay, well, what's the problem here? So it looks like when you get a file and you download it, your options are send it to Google, which not everybody wants to send every file to Google. That seems perhaps a little bit sketchy. Or open now, which seems like maybe that's not something you should do. Then when it downloads and the security checks are good and it looks like it's fine, it goes ahead and has this weird file format that doesn't actually allow you to open it. I don't know. I have no idea. It seems as though that this is a little bit of a mess. So I still haven't tested this out myself. There are also some other changes with Chrome that are coming out that we'll talk about soon, including getting rid of the lock icon right here. This is Firefox, but you get the idea. But we'll get to that in a little bit. So Chrome's going through some changes. It looks like their attempt to make it so you can't open like dangerous files is off to a little bit of a rocky start. But still, it's good to see the attempts at improvement. Okay, so this is the other one that I wanted to shout out, the other bill that is definitely a problem for like digital privacy. It's really gone through a lot of different attempts to have like a core objective of making the internet safer for children, as these often do. But along the way, it's gone through I think 4 different prime ministers, and through the course of that, it's had a total, a complete makeover and a lot of things added to, which are problematic. So I'm not going to go into this one too much. It's specifically for the UK. It's supposed to be doing a lot of things that are generally considered to be positive, but there's also the same kind of provisions against like end-to-end encryption and some other things that could also be an issue. So that's why a lot of like messaging applications, WhatsApp, like all these other ones that have end-to-end encryption are coming out against this bill. And there's just a lot here. So I will let you take a look at this if you want to see why the EFF is calling it a blueprint for repression around the world. Obviously, that is not a good assessment from an organization that's dedicated to like online digital rights. So yeah, a little bit scary here to see all these laws coming out that have potential impacts on the way that people are able to communicate on a fundamental level. All right, moving on. Dork GPT. They just keep coming out. A while ago, I was playing with Chat PDF that allows you to upload a PDF file and then chat with it. Now we've got Dork GPT. So what is Dork GPT? This is something that allows you to construct Google Dorks. So does it work? Yeah, it does. So I went ahead and I was like, all right, go ahead and search for a PNG image on the website catfancy.com. Uploaded before 2017. And look at that. It formats it for me. Of course, there are no results here. Let me make that larger. Boom. How's that? And yeah, I have definitely found this to be useful. Again, there's no results for this particular one, but you can just see how you can use natural language to, like, in this very specific prompt, generate dorks. So if you like a little bit of OSINT and you've been looking for a tool that helps you automate a creation of some dorks, then I think that this is actually pretty cool. This is another one I wanted to shout out. DirectD is a tool written in Go that allows you to look for like critical information, basically pivot points in investigations. That's going to be usernames, phone numbers, or email addresses across a bunch of different social networks. When you're doing these sorts of investigations, it's pretty common that you would, like expect to find a pivot point, like someone's old username or something like that, and then scour the internet trying to find different profiles that might have been registered with that. Well, this allows you to do it very easily. I'm sure I will go ahead and do a demo on this soon using, I don't know, something like Neil Breen again. So also, if you have projects that you want to try like this that are GitHub repositories, they look pretty good. They've got forks and stars and stuff. They've been updated recently. But let's say that you don't want your own computer to be at risk for this. Well, I have to say, I tend to go ahead and run these things in Google Cloud Shell. It just lets you take some of these OSINT tools that like need to be connected to the internet, but don't necessarily need to be, running on your computer. It lets you try them in an isolated environment. I would just use maybe like a throwaway Google account and then Cloud Shell to try out some of these things. Because am I going to read all these lines of code? No, I don't even speak Go. Like, I don't know how that works. However, I do recognize that maybe I don't want to run this on like my work computer. And you can either use a VPN or you can use Google's VPN. So just a little piece of advice for when you're trying out OSINT tools. Also, hello, everyone. I am looking at the chat. Good to see you, Tai Kwang Gong. And then, no, I have not gone over Molvad being raided. Although, if true, that is funny. But yeah, okay, let's continue on. Oh yeah, and I attempted to do, I thought that maybe I could like grab like file information, whatever, for JPEGs, and it seems like this type of Google Dork just isn't working. I don't totally know why that didn't work, but whatever. Okay. So we got lots of news to cover today. Again, I still have to give a shout out to like Bing for their ability to like make like code that actually works. Like that was cool. But there was one thing that I've actually never seen before. There's a ransomware gang that actually used the university's alert system. You know, the one that like typically warns about like on-campus shootings or like disasters or emergencies or whatever. It used their RAM alert system to instead send students and staff text messages and email alerts that their data was stolen and would soon be released. So when we see these sorts of ransomware attacks, like typically it's in their best interest to create as much trouble around the situation as possible in order to get the school to be under pressure, or the victim to be under pressure to pay. So we've seen all sorts of things in the past, like leaks to the press and other ways of getting people or shareholders to demand that the school or victim in this case, like do something about it. It looks like that is exactly what's going on here. I've just never seen it that the people who will be impacted by the actual leak are directly contacted by the ransomware people themselves using a compromised or leaked or like taken over system that they've gained access to. That's pretty bold to reach out to like students and staff and everything with this emergency alert system and let them know that they have compromised the university system. So yeah, add it to another milestone in terms of ransomware boldness to take over an emergency alert system and then use it to put more pressure on the ransomware victim. I've never seen that happen before. All right, next story. So the city of Dallas is a huge city. It's like one of the largest cities in the United States. I think it's like the 7th largest city. And they just experienced like dystopian style disruptions in their emergency services and other IT systems when the city came under attack by a ransomware gang. So we've heard the Royal Ransomware Gang a number of times. They were exploiting like a supply chain attack like a while ago where they were able to go after all these different customers of a particular vendor that had a vulnerability in their product. That caused a lot of really high profile businesses and organizations to get hit. And it seems like the city of Dallas, Texas is the most recent one. So we're getting reports of all sorts of IT systems getting shut down, including IT or 911 dispatchers having to write down received reports for officers rather than submitting them via the computer-assisted dispatch system. So the county police department's website was down, and they had to reschedule a bunch of judicial hearings because just nothing was working. They didn't have access to their files. That is crazy. Like attacking a major city's operations like that is truly a pretty incredible way of going about trying to get a ransom. But the Royal Ransomware Gang has gained a reputation for going after big entities and getting paid. So yeah, a really stunning ransomware attack on the city of Dallas. The fact that like their emergency services were affected and that their court services were also affected is pretty concerning, because that affects a lot of people's lives. As these ransomware attacks get more common, like we continue to see ones that are like attack like, the parking bureau or something where like it's annoying, but nobody's going to die over that. 911 services are a different story, especially like judicial services, different story. Like it's pretty crazy to see a major city's operations impacted to this degree from ransomware. So yeah, Royal Ransomware Gang has been getting around recently. They've gotten a lot of traction off of some of these supply chain attacks that they've done, and the city of Dallas appears to be one of the most recent victims. All right. So this one's really funny, and we're talking about supply chain attacks. Imagine working with a low-cost developer who really wants to get paid in the future. Let's say that they're unethical and they really want you to, pay them not just now, but then in the future. So rather than just provide a really good experience or write really good software, let's say that they're not that confident in the way that they did it, and they want to guarantee that you come back. Well, maybe they could introduce a logic bomb that's programmed to go off at a certain time that just breaks all of your stuff and makes it so that they have to hire you to come back in and fix it. Well, that is exactly the strategy that this developer went with. Orca is the maker of first-person viewed racing goggles, and it seems like a contractor they worked with introduced code that was designed to brick various devices and make it so that they no longer event. And this was uncovered in a racing event in Turkey. And there you go. You can see that they are put into bootloader mode. They're not able to be used. And now the manufacturer is warning people to not install the any side-loaded software. They only should be going through the official firmware. There's a fix in progress. But it's pretty bold for somebody who was a former contractor of this company to try to get them to give them more business by just basically breaking the software they wrote past a certain point. Maybe there was a clause in their contract that was ignored, or maybe they were planning to get rid of it later. Who knows? But yeah, this was the official announcement. I haven't seen this sort of thing happen too often, but when it does happen, it's usually illegal, but maybe they got this guy off of Upwork or something. I don't really know. So all right. So just be careful when you hire a contractor. Maybe have somebody else review the code. All right, so when cyber criminals get large amounts of credit cards, they often don't know if some of those are expired, if they're recycled from older dumps. It really is a problem because if you try too many scam credit cards, then you probably won't get what you want. For example, I run a store where if I get like 3 or 4 attempted credit cards before one goes through, I don't ship the order because it seems as though that person has too many credit cards and most of them don't work. A lot of different scam detection services work the same way. So if you have too many attempts at using fraudulent credit cards and most of them are either blocked or don't work anymore, then you're going to get in trouble really fast and your scam operation isn't going to make very much money. So what's the way around that? Well, somebody found a way to use a major payment gateways network to verify stolen credit cards before using them in campaigns. So this meant that there was someone who you could pay a couple Bitcoins, verify that all these cards were going to work before using them, and make sure that you don't get caught. Now, this was apparently a very good investment because this person made, I think it was like $18 million. I think like $18 million worth of Bitcoin or some similar currency doing this. Oh, yes. And here's our entrepreneur himself. So it appears that the person who orchestrated all this now resides in Russia. So the likelihood of them being prosecuted for this seemed to be incredibly low. But yeah, okay. So we can see that they did 17 million checks in a 13-month period to basically verify cards before they went into scams. So yeah, the sort of sophistication and side businesses that pop up in the cybercrime market is pretty crazy. This person made their money not doing any crime directly, except for just verifying credit cards for other people's crime. So working as like a crime helper here was actually a pretty lucrative business, although it appears that now they are under indictment so by the United States. So traveling is probably going to be off the menu, at least for a while. I don't know who Shadow Server is, but it's cool that they got a little shout out here. Yeah, there are easier ways to check a card, surely. You would think that, but like an easy way of bulk going through like a million credit card records and being able to verify like which ones are valid and then selling that like purified list, that provides real value. So like cyber criminals really can stage businesses that just make other people's scams like a little bit better or more efficient, and then stand to make a lot of money because these people have tons of cryptocurrency, they want to spend it, and if you don't mind being lit up like a Christmas tree with all sorts of like ransomware and other sorts of like ill-gotten goods, like in terms of Bitcoin being deposited into your account, then cool. But it seems like eventually this guy got caught. So I would imagine the extremely traceable nature of cryptocurrency may have had something to do with this, but who knows? All right, next up. So I constantly have to tell people about what is illegal and what is unethical and like what is acceptable when it comes to ethical hacking. There's a lot of people who are very smart and maybe don't have the good business sense to know that committing crimes to get a job just kind of like demonstrates to people that you don't know when to stop, and you might get their business in trouble too. Not necessarily that you are the best of the best. We'll see how the strategy works out. It seems like a security researcher has broken into the like PHP package hub that allowed him to take over a dozen packages. So that means that his code could have been inserted into lots and lots and lots of different projects. And based on the number of installs, this could have been a really, really serious breach. So what happened was the researcher broke into the account, was able to redirect links to his fork of these projects and make it so that people who were just trying to use the package manager were instead downloading his forked version instead. Now, the security researcher seemed pretty confident that this would get them a job. But yeah, so here's their little shout out. Again, I would not recommend this. I think that like even things like the guy that like found the vulnerability in like internet connected printers and then just had like everybody's printer print out a document saying that they needed to update their printer. Even that is a little bit risky, but going through and actually hijacking people's repos and making it so that their customers are downloading your version instead, even as a demo, that's pretty spicy. So maybe this person was tired of not getting paid for bug bounties. I don't really know what the motivation was here, but it still is a very confrontational way of putting your resume in front of potential, employers. I would say risk management, maybe not this person's strength. However, it seems like maybe pen testing and like being able to break into like supply chain accounts may be their forte. So I don't know. I hope whatever company ends up hiring them has a great lawyer. All right. So next up. So I'm not going to go too much into this one. I just want to note how many times now that you will get like an emergency update for like your Android phone or your iPhone, and it will be because of some commercial spyware vendor. So this is the result of a cyber mercenary out of Spain. And Google's threat analysis group is the usual suspect when it comes to infuriating these groups by like figuring out what they're doing and kind of unmasking them and talking about what they're doing. So this is a Spanish mercenary spyware vendor named Vasteron, known for its Heliconia exploit framework that targets Windows platform. And you'll see, I mean, they're called a mercenary for a reason. This implies that they will sell their stuff to anybody, the rich and powerful, anybody who has an enemy that they want to try to use their like advantage over. This software company will supply tools and basically weapons to attack anybody who these rich and powerful people want to go after. So that's why it is incredibly important to apply these updates and be aware that these companies exist, because while it's unlikely that you could be targeted by them, it's never it's never totally outside the reach of possibility. And because they are using zero-day vulnerabilities and then marketing them to whoever on the international market wants them, it makes these a really serious threat when it comes to people who have valuable information, people who are considered to be like prominent targets or critics of the rich and powerful. So that's why like it just shocks me how many of these updates you get to your phone are directly traceable back to a spyware or malware mercenary group that is willing to use these exploits for basically whoever will pay them. And good for Google for constantly calling them out. I really appreciate seeing these stories. All right, speaking for things with Google, passwordless sign-in is now going to be an option for all accounts. So what does that mean? It's a little bit confusing, but I read through it and let me provide you with my interpretation. So let's say that you want to sign into a Google account and you have a passkey set up on one of your devices. Being able to authenticate via biometrics, so like your fingerprint, your face, whatever, would be the way that this is envisioned to work. So I dug, okay, so we have a little demo here. So all right, you would want to log in, you would authenticate via something that had been like, set up on the phone, and then it would allow you to sign in based on that. That seems like a pretty smooth experience. It gets rid of any need to have a password, which is great because passwords suck. You have to change them all the time. You have to keep track of them all the time. It's just not a useful thing. So looking at the passkey setup page here, or at least the information page for it, it kind of tells you what you need and like what kinds of stuff that you could use. You can do a FIDO security key, a mobile device that runs iOS 16 or Android 9, or a laptop or desktop that runs Windows 10 or macOS Ventura. Very cool. So the goal here is if you have a compatible browser and if you have a compatible device, then you should be able to set up a passcode that means you can get into your accounts without needing a password. And that means you would have to steal someone's biometric information in order to get into their accounts, as well as potentially have physical access to the device that this has been set up on. That definitely raises the bar as opposed to just like getting a password and using it to log in. It looks like these sorts of shifts are going to make it so it's more and more difficult to use phishing to break into someone's account. Because, okay, like at this point, like what can a phishing attack accomplish against someone who's set up a passcode on their device? Like you would need physical access to the device plus that person's biometrics. That's a totally different game than just like phishing someone for their password. So I have to say, like, I enjoy seeing this. And it looks like one of our viewers has already set this up last night. So let me know how that goes for you. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Was it easy to do? I was just going to set it up before the stream, and then I was like, I should probably focus on setting up the stream. And I was still 5 minutes late. But yes, if you have already set this up, if you have opinions on it, I want to know, because it seems like a really great way to buff your security. And I hate passwords. They suck. This seems like a cool thing that I hope is supported on more and more different accounts, because having a trusted device with you is, I think, like more secure than having a password sometimes. Password managers, of course, continue to be something that are useful and I highly recommend, but I mean, just not having a password after all, like, might end up being the thing. Now, do I like using biometrics? No, I don't, because how many times can you like change your fingerprint? And it does appear that this is some sort of like authentication thing that happens just on the device. It doesn't transmit any biometric information off the device. But I still am a little bit leery sometimes about using like biometrics. Like there are some legal implications for that. For example, like I believe that police can compel you to unlock things with like your fingerprint. So if you can sign into all of your Google accounts with your fingerprint, is that good from a legal perspective? Think about it. I mean, it does kind of, it is definitely a new reality when it comes to like logging into accounts and under what circumstances you could be compelled to log into that account. So just something to think about for the privacy conscious people. Like I've seen advice out there that like you shouldn't use biometrics to secure your important accounts, and this could be construed as like a like a biometric way of getting into some of your sensitive accounts. So think about it. I would love to hear what a lawyer has to think about that, but just off the top of my head, that would be one of my concerns about switching over to this. Yes, and I am not the only one who thinks that biometrics might not be the best thing to do. Also, we're also wondering in the chat if the passkey could be stolen. I think if I'm correct, I'm imagining that this works by having like something act like a hardware key where it has a chip that has a secret like random number generator, but like once it's registered, something can tell basically that it all came from the same random number. So that way the public private key kind of thing would allow you to use that device as a token itself. So it's kind of like just behind the scenes using like a two-factor like token, it seems to me as though they're making it so that you, like, using your biometric identifier will automatically use your device as like a login key. So that's kind of my thought, is like it's taken the process of having one of these physical login keys that you plug in and press in order to authenticate a new device, and then kind of sweat that behind some like biometrics to make it easier for people to do. That's my interpretation on like a hardware level, but I could also be wrong. Thank you very much, Kimberly. Biometric can be subpoenaed. Yeah, I mean, forcing you to put your thumb on something is very different than torturing you to come up with a password. So because I don't think you can be compelled to come up with your password if you claim to forget it or whatever, I just don't think there's a legal way of doing it. Biometrics are entirely different. So just keep that in mind. There's different legal ramifications for the way that you choose to access your devices. Having a PIN is always going to be more secure, because I don't like a PIN counts as a password. And legally, I don't think you can be compelled to turn it over in the same way that biometrics can. So just keep that in mind. It's something that is your own personal security model. But a lot of people who are privacy focused would say Google isn't particularly incentivized to have like legal privacy like be the focus behind this. They want user ease of use, basically, to be the primary thing here. And again, I'll point out, you can all... Oh, actually, no, never mind. I was going to say you can already kind of do this by just using like a two-factor key, like a FIDO key, but that's not entirely true, because right now you still do need to use your password. So it's basically replacing your password with like a biometric lock, and then using the FIDO key as like the way of logging in, basically on like a abstracted level. Okay, cool. So let's keep rolling. All right, so every time I cover a crypto exchange being hacked, I feel like I'm using made-up words. So let's get into it. All right, so we've got, as you can probably expect, a smart contract. And really, if I just wanted to high-level the story, I would say that just because you get audited doesn't mean that your company is secure. Code gets added after the audit. It doesn't get included in the audit. So this company had very publicly announced that they had been audited twice, and that is why you should go with them. However, it turns out that there was a problem. In fact, there were multiple problems, and somebody found out how to exploit the smart contract and steal a bunch of some sorts of tokens of an unknown value. Now, this token of an unknown value has 50% less value after this happened. The value has dropped by half. And yeah, it seems as though this is a pretty common thing with like exchanges. Audited does not mean secure is really the takeaway here. Again, I am not, I would need to refer to my cryptozoology expert to know like more about, everything going on behind this. But it is becoming a more common thing that these smart contracts get audited. Maybe not all of it gets audited, and then they get popped with some sort of way of getting around it and transferring too much money or a money-like idea. All right, let's move on before I get too lost in this one. All right. One password, you might be feeling pretty cool about yourself in that, you're not using LastPass. However, there's a problem. A lot of people got password change alerts, which is not what you want to hear from, your password manager. If the password is changed without your consent, that generally means that something terrible has happened. But in this case, it seems as though this was a false alert. So if you got these, you can presumably, hopefully relax. Things are tense in the password manager space right now. So I don't know if relax is the right word. Yeah, so sorry, I was just checking the comments. Yes, Funky Monk, I think that for Americans, they can make us give up a biometric, but not a password, something like that. So yeah, if you were worried about this, it appears to not really be anything other than a false alarm. But for people in the password manager space, again, things are very tense with everything that happened with LastPass. So everything seems to be fine, but I know we'll check back in a week and make sure that this was in fact fine. All right, so next up, FBI has seized 6 crypto exchanges that were used to launder ransomware payments. I can do the story without feeling like I'm having a stroke. So pridechange.com, 101crypto.com. So these are all different cryptocurrency exchanges that were doing mixing. So Bitcoin tumbling or mixing is a practice where you take a bunch of Bitcoins that were used in like ransomware payments or something that's like way too hot to cash them out, and you put them into a service and they get juggled around and tossed around and whatnot. And then everybody gets random Bitcoins back in the same amount that they put in, minus the service fee, of course. But it makes it really for law enforcement or other people tracing the coins to figure out like where they eventually went to, because you're mixing all the coins together and just creating a big mess. So these are key to ransomware operators being able to launder their money and turn it into something else. To launder their money-like idea and turn it into money. But the FBI has made it a little bit more difficult by taking down some of these very prominent and I would say relatively easy to access services that purport to be, like legal ways of mixing up your Bitcoin, but really like they have the strongest business case for specifically laundering Bitcoin ransoms. So there's a seizure banner. Who got on this one? Like the National Police of, I believe that's Ukraine. Yep. Cyber Police of Ukraine. We got the FBI. I don't speak Ukrainian, but I assume that's also something to do with Ukraine because they got the little crown there. And then the Department of Justice. So good for all these guys for, getting their Bitcoin tumblers. So again, I pointed out earlier in the stream that like there are a lot of parallel industries in the cybercrime and like market that people just find a way to make other cyber criminals like profits more profitable or their operations less burdensome. And they can make a lot of money by doing this. So I imagine that a lot of the people who are running these exchanges made money hand over fist because, a lot of these times, if the ransomware gangs are able to get like 75% of the money they got in the ransom back after service fees and like somebody getting their cut, then that's still a big win for them. So I imagine a lot of these were hugely profitable organizations. I wouldn't have expected pridechange.com, but it's a strange time. All right, so next up, this is what I was talking about earlier in terms of changes to the way Chrome is going to look. Right now, if I were in Chrome, which I am, I'm in Chrome this time. All right, if I were to see this little lock, I might be, if I were, just a regular person that didn't understand what that means, I would be like, oh, this website's secure, 100%. It's connection secure, cookie and site data is good. We're all good. This is a legitimate website. Well, I can go to plenty of scam websites and they will have a big lock icon right here. So for a layperson, like this doesn't mean anything anymore. Like, what do you think? Like, if you were to ask a kid like what this means, they would be like, oh, like the website's secure. But that is not what it means. It means that it has HTTPS, but like 99% of websites nowadays have HTTPS. Yeah, sorry, 99% of all websites are now loaded over HTTPS. So what does that mean? Well, for one, if I'm trying to do demos on how to like sniff traffic on like, browsers or whatever, it's really hard. I have to look up like middle schools, like in order to find websites that do not load over HTTPS anymore. It is a struggle. In fact, I'm probably going to use that like Dork GPT tool to like help me find HTTP only websites because it's honestly becoming troublesome to find them. So in that light, like this was originally designed to be like, oh, look, the website's using HTTP, but like, nowadays the time that you'll see this broken lock is when you're loading like your router. Like when you're loading like your routers page or something. There's plenty of other ways to communicate that like they're not using a secure like transit method without implying that the entire website is secure and giving like the impression that that is not like that it's not a phishing page. There's plenty of phishing pages that use HTTPS. Like it is not a barrier to entry anymore. So Google's decided that there are so many misunderstandings here that they're going to make this beep bop robot be the new thing instead. So instead of seeing this lock telling you, hey, you're in a safe place, you can be free, don't worry about anything, you're going to see this thing that's just like, you want some settings, and if you click on it, then you can be like, okay, the connection's secure, cookies and site data, blah blah blah. So yeah, you can see this is their data on the percentage of websites loaded over HTTPS. It's hovering around 99%, and they've decided that it's time to make this something that is no longer tied to someone's perception of the security of a page. So if you've ever like caught yourself being like, oh, but it has a green check mark, and like thinking that that meant something beyond just that they're using HTTPS, then I've got some news for you. Like finally it's coming to an end. You will no longer be tricked. And the next generation of people who have never heard of HTTP versus HTTPS will not have to be under the false impression that this is like telling you that the website is secure. I'm curious, how many of you guys like thought that this did something other than just tell you that this wasn't loading via HTTP or HTTP? If you had a false impression, then like I actually kind of thought that like it might do something more than that too. So I kind of think that that actually is an improvement. All right, let's move on. So if you're in Utah, you might have noticed that there's a couple of websites that are no longer accessible to you. And that's because there have been a lot of these laws put into effect that kind of are making it either difficult for website operators to comply, or like put a pretty large burden on something that used to be like a matter of like privacy. So typically, like if people are going to, I don't know, certain websites, they don't want a lot of records necessarily maintained about that activity because it's like private and there's some sort of like expectation of privacy, one might say. It looks as though the state of Utah has decided that they now would like to know everybody who's looking at this website, and to, on top of that, verify their age via some sort of trackable legal method. Now, what that means is that it seems like the parent company for this website is now required to keep records on everybody in Utah who does something that could be conceived as immoral and could maybe be retaliated against, or maybe have that information leak and come back and hurt them. A lot of people don't necessarily want a registry of their activity on every website that they go to. And that is why the parent company here seems to have just decided to have blocked the entirety of the state. Now, there was also, in an unrelated story, a massive surge in searches for VPNs in the state of Utah. Who could say why? But this is kind of an example of what happens when one of these bills actually gets implemented, and then is so difficult to work with that companies just start denying services, or otherwise doing these kind of like blanket restrictions rather than have to comply with, basically helping to spy on the citizens of Utah. So I think this is pretty funny. But a lot of other places are considering laws like this, UK being one of them. So if you're in the UK and you don't want to have every website you go to be part of like a government registry and have your identity verified in order to do it, and then stored somewhere and then potentially leaked, then now's the time to speak up, because it is now officially too late in Utah to speak up. So this is a time when a lot of anti-privacy legislation is going through in a number of different places. It's often framed as trying to protect children or trying to stop terrorists or whatever else, but it's fundamentally an attack on private speech and the relatively few places that mass surveillance and like sometimes warrantless surveillance can still creep into nowadays. So yeah, I have some opinions on this, but obviously, like these bills are going into effect all over the place. They're still being debated in a lot of places. So if you have the ability to push back against them, then you will be preserving the digital rights of future generations. All right, so another police operation targeted at Tor marketplaces, this one called Spector, arrested 288 dark web drug vendors. And in this case, there were some previously named versions, which I wanted to find. Oh yes, Disruptor and Dark Hunter, which I feel like was a little bit of a stretch. This one, Spector, ghost, whatever, like sounds pretty cool. We can see this unfortunate clip art specialist got arrested by the SWAT team in the middle of his hacking. That's very sad for him. So $55 million in cash and cryptocurrency, or monopoly money, as I like to call it. This was all active on a marketplace known as Monopoly Market, which was seized by the government in, 2019 or something like this. And then they continued to let it run for a while in order to identify people. They proceeded to do this in Germany and in a bunch of other places. Let's see. Austria, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Poland, Brazil, Switzerland, United Kingdom, and United States. Brazil doesn't surprise me. I don't know why. There's a lot of cybercrime. So a lot of arrests around the globe, lots of money, lots of drugs, and some firearms too. 117. That's a good amount for that number of suspects, especially in those countries, except for Brazil, where everyone can have guns, and also the United States and Switzerland. And okay, never mind. So I guess this makes sense. So if you want to see more, you can check out this little Operation Spector video, but we're running out of time, so I'm going to try to get through the last couple things here. In spite of some initial missteps in perhaps naming the operation, it seems as though this was pretty successful. And for anybody who's operating on dark web marketplaces, these sorts of things are also designed to erode confidence in those spaces and make it so criminals are afraid to commit too heavily to them and waste their time and energy being super paranoid instead. Why is the Pirate Bay still up? Because the CIA has funding. Happy to do a little Q&A during the stream. All right. Apple has introduced something called Rapid Security Responses, which I've been seeing pop up on my computer for the last 2 days. Now, the idea here is that they are supposed to be like in between patches, where when we uncover yet another like Spanish mercenary spyware group, we're able to install these patches relatively easily and get them out fast rather than waiting for the next update cycle. Problem is, they're not installing correctly on all devices. On my macOS system, it still hasn't installed, and then on a lot of iOS devices, it seems to be having issues as well. So while this is a great strategy, they are not being very forthcoming about like what the fixes are here. That's kind of to be expected, honestly, because until they're widespread adopted, this could be really severe and then copied by other threat actors and then used to attack the same vendor. So it seems as though it's a little bit of a rocky start. Some iPhones can install it. I wasn't able to install it, but it is a good idea, and I'm glad that they're rolling out these fixes more frequently. All right, so now we've come to the part of our show where we announce who's getting free credit monitoring. And as usual, it's T-Mobile customers. But in this case, it's only like 800. So when I say only 800, typically if we were just talking about like, oh, like your, I don't know, social security number was the only thing breached. I mean, that's still pretty bad, but it's one piece of information, or maybe just your phone number or something. Like, sure, that would be bad. But of these 863 customers, this is highly extensive. And it exposes them in a pretty unique way to identity theft and phishing attacks. It seems as though the measures they put in place alerted them to an unauthorized activity, and they were able to stop that the bad actor had gained access to more information, but they already were able to access like 800 accounts and get a lot of information. Let's see. So no call records or financial information, but personally identifiable information, which was more than enough data for identity theft, full name, contact information, account number, associated phone numbers, T-Mobile account PIN, social security number, government ID, date of birth, balance due, international internal code that T-Mobile uses to service customer accounts, rate plan, feature codes, and the number of lines. So if you wanted to SIM swap someone, like that's basically all you need to convince like a T-Mobile employee that you're the right person, and to SIM swap them. That's like a play-by-play of all the information you need to SIM swap someone. So if you're not aware of SIM swapping attacks, or where somebody uses your information that they already know about to call your cell provider, move your number over to theirs, and then do all of your two-factor codes back to that number in order to allow them access to your account. That obviously sucks. So these 800 and some people now have access to free credit monitoring. But as a result, I would just say that it's probably almost an inevitability that somebody tries to use this information against them. So that sucks. Enjoy your free credit monitoring, and sad to see another. This is the second breach disclosed in 2023 for T-Mobile. So it's more encouraging that this is the smallest breach of the ones that we've heard reported lately, but it is discouraging that the amount of data in this is more than enough to like reset someone's T-Mobile like information or be able to manipulate their existing lines. All right, we're 1 minute over, but let's do our last one. So this is when we talk about like critical like supply chain stuff and like ransomware attacks, like there's a couple industries that come to mind. And this unfortunately is one of the worst ones that I feel like could be hit by ransomware, and that is the cold storage industry. So cold storage is a logistics challenge that was kind of exposed during the COVID-19 pandemic, where we saw that there wasn't enough cold storage infrastructure to be able to move these like super cold vaccines around effectively. So introducing ransomware into the mix is a recipe for disaster. And it looks like Americold, which is one of the largest providers of cold storage logistics, was having IT issues that was causing them to request customers delay and potentially have their system down until mid next week. So it sounds like they have like some sort of plan for remediation to at least have a timeline like that, or they could have just picked a number at random. I don't really know. But it looks like inbound and outbound deliveries have been canceled, which is a huge deal because like cold storage implies like extremely sensitive stuff, like things that need to be delivered on time and held at very precise temperatures. So this is, again, like one of the worst industries that could be hit with this sort of like disruptive ransomware, because they have so much critical stuff that's often very expensive and incredibly sensitive that needs to be moved on very precise schedules. So having worked in logistics, I can just imagine how much of a nightmare this is for that company. We'll probably hear more about them later. But just one of the more shocking ransomware attacks this week, because like I've seen Americold stuff all over the place. They have like hundreds of cold storage warehouses all over the country, and kind of crazy. Yes, literal cold storage, not like data, not like figurative cold storage. This is literally they're moving around like vaccines and stuff that has to be kept like extremely cold. This could be like industrial equipment, certain chemicals, like biomedical stuff, like transplants. Like these are all like super critical things. So we're going to see a ripple effect of businesses affected by the inability to get cold storage logistics stuff moved. We're not just talking about food here. We're definitely talking about like biomedical, like organ transplants, all those sorts of crazy things that could be affected by an attack like this on such a large provider like facilities and logistics. So yeah, damn, like very active week this week in terms of just like general attacks and companies trying to level up and do a little bit better of a job. So that's most of what we have for the show, but I also wanted to give a shout out to, I want to go to varonis.com/Kody. This week, we have our demystifying DSPM. If you smell what Varonis is cooking. So this is data security posture management. This is something that all companies need to look into when they are in charge of lots of critical data, as many of the companies we reported on this week are. So if you want to see a little bit about what Varonis is kind of like trying to get companies to think about when it comes to preventing these sorts of attacks and being able to like assume there's going to be a breach and then have things set up in a way where like it's not going to be that big of a deal if it happens. That's going to be what this is all about. You can also check out the last state of cybercrime on the Varonis YouTube channel, which is an awesome, if slightly shorter roundup of all the cybersecurity crime that's gone on the last month. So if you want to check that out, you can go to varonis.com/Kody to sign up for this next event. And per always, a shout out to Varonis for continuing to sponsor this stream, letting me spend my time on it, and getting to spend my time hanging out with all of you each week. So we will see you again on Wednesday when we do our live Q&A. And for those who are asking, I believe the next live Q&A Wednesday is when we are going to be debuting the Discord community that I have been working on. You guys have requested it. I've been listening. I've been testing some things out, having people who like live on Discord take a look at it and see what they would change and not change. And I think we're pretty much ready to start rolling it out. So hopefully we'll get to see you on some of that Discord community. If you have questions and they haven't been answered, maybe they're about news here, or if you're watching this on replay, make sure to leave those questions on the YouTube channel, that's securityfwd, and we will see you next time. All right, I have to roll my own graphics now. All right, see ya.